sera en entier en anglais puisque nous avons des invités qui viennent de toute l'Europe. Donc, on doit faire la conférence en anglais. Dear member of UNIL, dear guest, dear friends and colleagues, welcome. My name is Elsa Bernauer, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of LaMoViDA. We are delighted to have you with us for our conference and roundtable discussion on Ecovillages, imagining and building a sustainable future. Thank you all for coming here to the University of Lausanne. We would like first and foremost to thank the Vice-Rectorate for Campus and Sustainability of the University of Lausanne, the new Interdisciplinarity Center for Sustainability, the Science Society Interface, the Faculty of Geoscience and Environmental Studies, and the Institute of Geography and Sustainability, without whose financial and institutional support this event could not have taken place. In light of our current environmental, energetic, and social crisis, how can we imagine and build a sustainable society? Our student association, LaMoViDA, Laboratoire pour les modes de vie durables et alternatifs, was started a few years ago to capitalize on the answer brought to this question by people from around the world who are leading the change by living in a truly alternative way, and thus, in a significant part, in Ecovillages. To collectively discuss this complex set of problems and their possible solutions, we have invited guests to exchange with us tonight on their view on Ecovillages and how they can help remodel this world. We warmly thank them for coming here from around Europe to share with us their experience, their knowledge, and their passion. Let me start with our moderator. Christian Arnsberger, Professor of Sustainability and Economic Anthropology at the Institute for Geography and Sustainability of the Faculty of Geoscience and Environmental Studies. He holds a PhD in economics and has been teaching and researching for many years at the interface between economic analysis, human science, and existential philosophy. A specialist of post-consumerist, post-growth economic alternatives and of the link between ecological transition and the change in mentalities and lifestyle. He also, several years ago, gave the impulse that eventually developed into our association, LaMoViDA. And now let me continue with our guest. Boris Bernini is a member of the Ecovillage of Damanhur, close to Turin in northern Italy. This ecovillage, founded in 1975 by Roberto Airodi, is, I quote their website, a federation of spiritual communities with its own constitution, culture, art, music, currency, school, and use of science and technology. Its founders, I still quote, enlightened and pragmatic vision created a fertile reality based on solidarity, sharing, love, and respect for the environment. As a result, Damanhur has slowly expanded into a United Nations award-winning sustainable eco-community. Staying true to Falco's original vision of a community based upon ethical and spiritual value, Damanhur has captivated attention around the world as a laboratory for experimenting with sustainable ways of living in harmony with nature and its elements and forces. Anna Kovasna was born in Sweden and lived for 5 years in the Scottish eco-village of Findhorn, before started a nomad life on a sailing boat. She works as an education director at the Global Ecovillage Network, channeling applied ecovillage research and experience into resources for those engaged in innovation and implementing regenerative lifestyles. She has done academic research on localization and participatory community building as a tool for autonomy and social change. Having lived and worked internationally in several ecovillages, tribal communities and organizations, Anna has practical experience of facilitation, education, research, and community development in variety of settings. Sonja Vera Schmidt is co-founder and member of the Ecovillage of Schloss Gleissig, of the shore of the Bodensee in Switzerland. This intentional community is shared by close to 40 adults and 20 children. A singer, a flutist, a dancer, Sonja Vera Schmidt has been practicing body therapy through breathing and talking since 1995. Since 2016, Schloss Gleissig organized a month-long course on eco-village design called Creating a Transformative Culture. Paul Tao Wimbush is a founder of Lamas Eco-Village in Western Wales. Before settling there, he lived in multiple alternatives communities. His training in architecture and carpentry, together with his passion for social structure, make his knowledge of alternative and sustainable community unique. He has hosted the internet TV series Living in the Future, and is the author of a very interesting book, The Birth of an Eco-Village. Catherine Nachbar and Loïc Bernet are two architects who just recently graduated from the Federal Polytechnic School of Lausanne, EPFL. Their work on permaculture-inspired low-tech eco-settlement near La Bourdonnette won them the Durabilist Prize last year. The master project, carried out in collaboration with LaMoViDA, that you can see outside, and imagining what an eco-village on campus of the University of Lausanne could look like. It received a second Durabilist Prize this year. They are researching how architecture can have a positive impact on the environment and how it can beneficially impact our way of living together as a community. For the next 2 hours, we will discuss the alternative way of life, consumption, and building that are being pioneered and experimented by Ecovillage and their inhabitants. And we will reflect on what we could perhaps be doing locally here at the University of Lausanne to join this existing movement. Before I give the floor to Christian for his introduction on Ecovillages, I want to thank you all for coming and wish you a wonderful evening.
So, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I want to start by introducing the general framework within which we've been thinking and working to prepare this evening. Basically, eco-villages are a specific phenomenon. The broader problem that many of us here at UNIL are interested in is how to create a more sustainable society, and in particular, how to overcome what some people call petropolis, which is basically any way of settling, any human settlement that relies on faraway flows of materials, energy, goods, services, in order to organize people's lives. This is a model that's been developing for about a century and a half and has now become kind of obsolete, we could say. We can't quite go back to what Herbert Girardet has called agropolis, which is the old model of, there are still some towns left like that, but the old model of a town with its hinterland nicely arranged around it. We can't usually go back to that immediately. So what we need to do is basically to rethink, to reimagine eco-cities and more generally, ecologically sustainable modes of settlement for the 21st century. We need to find a new mix between the various components of modern life, and in that sense, some tools that I've personally found interesting and stimulating are the so-called eco-city fractal. A fractal being a part of the whole that kind of replicates the whole at a smaller scale. So at its appropriate scale, each part is going to look like the whole, and all parts together form the whole. This is the idea of fractality. And fractality may well be one of the most important concepts we have today to think about how to rearrange our urban spaces and our space in general. Another concept which I've personally found interesting is Richard Register's notion of the integral neighborhood, which is closely linked to the notion of a fractal. Richard Register says the following: urban fractals, or portions of the city that embody the essential functions of the whole city at a smaller scale and relate them successfully to the natural environment as well, are keys to understanding the ecological city, and I would say more generally, ecologically sound ways of settling the land. On the small scale, integral neighborhoods bring together a full mix of land uses from housing and jobs to shops and small manufacturing operations. This is what I see personally as a very important domain with which to think about how to remodel and refurbish our cities today. Now, in that framework, I found it very stimulating to explore what I would call the eco-village paradigm. The eco-village paradigm is, in a sense, the fact of taking the wisdom of eco-villages. That brings us to the topic of tonight. The wisdom of eco-villages, and to see how it can be applied also by non-eco-village settlers, dwellers, in order to rethink, to start moving towards more ecologically and humanly sound ways of living on the land. And people like Paul Glover, for example, in the United States, people like Richard Register, whom I just talked about, also in the United States, and Paula Vigano right here in Lausanne, are examples of urbanists and architects who are actually, actively thinking on how to use this kind of paradigm to think about new ways of building and planning cities. Okay, so that's kind of the background for tonight. The idea is, should we maybe envision the future of our cities as being kind of horizontal metropolises made up of one or several networks of eco-villages? This is a very general view, but it seems to me like it's one of the most fruitful ways of rethinking our urban and our mix of urban and rural life today. So our hypothesis is going to be the following. The eco-village paradigm is a key toolbox. It's a toolbox, okay? Doesn't mean everyone has to live in eco-villages literally. We'll talk about that later. But it's a toolbox for low-carbon, sustainable, convivial, and regenerative human settlements to be imagined and built as the successors to today's metropolis cities. And, very importantly, we need eco-villages as key nodes of cutting-edge experimentation. We have something to learn from them. They are nodes of experimentation and innovation. Innovation in the social realm, in the economic realm, in the ecological realm, and in the cultural realm. So the focus, one of the main focuses tonight should be how eco-villages are engines of innovation. I would say, if you permit, true innovation. Innovation that leads us in what I and many others feel to be the right direction given the ecological and social problems we're facing today. Now, eco-villages as such, here I'm going to use the by now pretty standard definition given by the Global Eco-Village Network. An eco-village is an intentional traditional or urban community that's consciously designed through locally owned participatory processes in all four dimensions of sustainability: social, culture, ecology, and economy, to regenerate their social and natural environments. So they can be located in cities, around cities, in rural contexts, but they have specific aims and goals and the specific ways of attaining these aims and goals. Okay? So that's how the eco-village paradigm, in a sense, can be used over and beyond any existing eco-village. Very quickly, Anna, how many eco-villages are there in Europe, roughly, right now?
I have no idea.
Yeah, we have no idea. Okay, there hasn't been any...
Maybe, members of Gen, maybe 80.
80, okay. I took this from the website of the Global Eco-Village Network, so it's okay. You see that the main backbone of the eco-village movement in Europe seems to be going from the southeast of France up through Holland, going partly, I don't know if it passes around Switzerland or crosses it, but we seem to be on the right meridian here. And so it's clearly both a movement that is sustained, that has been around for a good while now, and that's remaining. You know, it's not a massively mainstream movement, but that's not the point today. We don't need to just look at massively mainstream stuff. We need to go get innovation where it's really being done. And our hypothesis for tonight is that eco-villages are one of those areas where actual, true, often unseen innovation is happening. And that's what we need to look at. The Global Eco-Village Network, Anna Kovazna is a member of it. I mean, is an active worker in it. Some people here are from eco-villages that are also members of it. I'm just putting that on the slide here. I'm not going to comment it a lot. She can maybe say a few words later about it if the opportunity arises. Roughly, it's a network that tries to make visible eco-villages around the world, and that has continental chapters which kind of work closely with specific eco-villages in specific areas. Okay? Now, the Global Eco-Village Network has created or induced from practice. I mean, this is not some intellectual construct. It's coming from the practices of the eco-villages that are its members, and others as well, a series of eco-village design principles in the social, the cultural, the ecological, the economic, and the systemic realm. We're not going to have time to go through all of them, but roughly the social domain of sustainability and eco-village design turns around the diversity of communities, how they're built, how they're functioning, how the social relationships inside them are created and sustained, and how they evolve. The cultural dimension has to do with how higher purpose and vision is created, how it's clarified, how it's nurtured, and how the mindfulness and reflection and also ritual and celebratory dimensions of eco-villages are built and perpetuated. The ecological dimension of eco-village design turns around food, soils, replenishing sources of water, overall regenerative practices on the land, whether it's rural land or urban land. The economic dimensions, well, they're concerned with, let's say, in most cases, alternative ways of earning money, earning income, producing, organizing production, organizing, selling, and so on. All the way to some eco-villages having or helping to design alternative banking and monetary systems. And the whole system perspective is kind of the hub that makes the wheel of the four others turn. And it's about introducing whole systems thinking, occasionally and quite often now from a permaculture perspective, into the functioning of the eco-village. Now, our aim tonight could be, to kind of delineate what I would call an eco-village design wisdom, or at least to make our audience feel what that could be, what that is, what we can learn from eco-village design as it is being practiced. And roughly there are two issues, I would say. First, if we look at existing eco-villages, what do they have to teach us when it comes to redesigning our urban, suburban, or rural lives if we want them to be more sustainable? What can we learn from existing eco-villages? Okay? That's, I would say, the most immediate question. But there's actually, I think, a second question, equally interesting, which is you guys, you the people who already live in eco-villages. What do you think one learns about the meaning of sustainability and maybe even the meaning of life when one starts designing an eco-village? So what does one learn when one enters the process of designing an eco-village as an active actor in it? I'm asking that because we will also, as Elsa already hinted at, we'll also be showing you a project in which we might want to enter into the design of an eco-village on this campus here. So there's also a question of how do you learn stuff when you start designing an eco-village, when you try to make that design a reality? Okay? So that's what I would call the eco-village design wisdom questions. Now, to start our discussion for tonight, and to invite our guests for the first time to actually speak, we've spoken a lot and they've just been sitting there. We're going to ask them a common question. Spoiler, they've been told this question beforehand, so it's not as if they're discovering it now, but still, we're going to want to hear their answers in a first step, and then we'll have them discuss it a bit amongst themselves. We'll keep your questions for a bit later, if that's okay. The question is the following. According to your experience and how that experience has shaped your view of the world, what would you say are the main ways in which eco-villages today can help us imagine and build a sustainable future? Okay? And I would like to invite first, it's, I think, Tao.
Hello.
You need to press the button.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me tonight. For me, I feel privileged and blessed. I've spent most of my life living in an eco-village. And what that's given me is the opportunity to redesign my relationship, the human relationship, with the natural world, with the land base. We are human beings, part of an intrinsic ecosystem. We are part of the land base. That's not a, well, maybe that is a cerebral concept, but when you live it, it becomes more than a cerebral concept. It becomes an experience. So let me illustrate that a bit. So I grew up in suburbia, in the home counties in England, very ordinary upbringing. I would turn on the light switch, the lights would go on, and I would flush the sink and the water would be carried away. And I didn't know where. No? Yeah. I didn't know where that electricity came from, and I didn't know where that water went. I grew up in a culture disconnected from the land base. I moved to Tipi Valley, I lived in Brithdy Mawr, and then I started the LaMoViDA village. And through that journey, my life experience has changed. I no longer experience my life as an isolated being disconnected from my environment. I experience my life as part of a wider ecology. And that experience is incredibly empowering and totally transformational. So, in a nutshell, for me, that's what Ecovillages are about. It's about redesigning the human relationship with the land base. Thank you.
Thank you, Tao. Next, Sonia, if you're okay.
I'm so happy. I wrote a lot in my computer, and I won't say anything of that because it appears to me that I learned a different connection to myself because if I can connect differently to my feelings, to my being, to my whole, I have a different source to be more happy in life. So this is what community gives me. It gives me a huge castle of mirrors where I can look into and take back. And this is like, for me, a modern monastery where you can work on your own self. And if you commit to that, you really get a lot of possibilities to grow into. So for me, silence got a very important part of my life because normally as in every community or association or so, you have a lot of processes and conflicts and all that human stuff. And if you take it as a possibility to grow, it's a huge journey. It's for yourself the best gift to be with humankind. Yeah. And if you as a group commit to this, to inner growth, you experience you're not alone on this track, and you have a huge playground to go through together. Yeah, and I can really wish this for everyone to do that in a deep, deep way. And for us in our community, the singing is a very important part. So this cultural aspect of experimenting with music and with silence and also with the ways of sharing and communication. So there grew a huge variety and methods of how to deal with conflicts in groups and decision-making processes and all that. So if you gather this on your way, living in a community, this is what I'm doing now. I'm doing this 5 weeks course where people can learn how to create communities and how to create ecovillages, because we are so rich at our community with all these tools, so beautiful possibilities to dive deeper in how being human. Yeah, and this is what I now also can connect more and more into the international level, because we need to do a lot on this field of human being with each other. It touched me so much to see other nations here sitting and other ages sitting here than the students. So we need this variety in all kinds to not feel alone anymore, but to connect and to connect again to yourself and the others and all that. So, yeah. Yeah, let's go for the big, big humanity dream to get human.
Thank you, Sonia. Okay. Boris?
Hello. So I had the chance, maybe the luck, I don't know, was born in Damanhur. So I spent my whole life in an eco-village, and I decided relatively recently to be actively part of this process, of this project. So I experienced on my skin a little bit more than half of the history of Damanhur, that have 44 years and 600 people, so it's also a very big community, comparatively speaking, with other realities. And two main elements that always impressed me a lot, also while I was traveling, while I was doing my studies in university, was the principle of choice and the principle of being active and seeing your action, and seeing the effects of your action. The eco-village or the community, the intentional community, have basically the individual choice to participating as his own foundation. So you choose your own reality, you choose your own dream. And this is a very interesting point, because usually we are born in some place and we live it, and eventually maybe we flee from it and we travel around. But often we have not the chance to really choose our own dreams in this sense. And at the same time, in a dimension that is intermediate between a very small family, for example, of maybe 3 people, and a large city of maybe 1 million people, you have this golden number of maybe 100, 200, 220 people, in which you as an individual can still act, and you can see directly the results of your action. And collectively, you can create something different, because socially, you rediscover your meanings. And you can also adapt your meanings to your own choices, your own desire, your different needs. So those two elements for me also, I studied political science and now international science, has always very interested me, because as we already said, Ecovillage is a tool. This model is a tool. And since I think this tool is very helpful for the individual growth and the individual responsibility of the individuals, is a very precious tool for the future, to fight against the personal desperation of seeing big changing in the world and not knowing how to act, how to react to those.
Thank you, Boris. Thank you very much. Anna?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that struck me in the first eco-village I ever visited was a sense of relief and a sense of, wow, all of me can finally fit in one place. Like, I can be an academic, I can be a gardener, I can be a dancer, I can be somebody who installs solar panels and builds water systems, and I can read poetry at night. And like, it all fits in one place and with one group of people. And I think for me, that was a revelation. I was in my 20s. And I just felt like, okay, wow, I can actually live a life that includes all of these dimensions and that lets me be a whole human in a way that I did not experience society outside of eco-villages to be. So for me, that's a very, very strong one. And when it comes to this question, I really like the word imagine, a sustainable future, because for me, it's one of the big gifts of eco-villages. Like, eco-villages are lived examples of other realities that exist here among us, you know? So you can visit an eco-village and really experience, like Tao said, like, you can live it. You can live what it's like to live in a different logic, a different social, cultural, economic, and ecological logic, and a different set of relationships. And it's different from just thinking about it. You can really feel it and experience it. And for me, if we don't have these sources of imagination, we become very, very poor as human beings and as change agents, because if we cannot imagine that something else is possible, we will never create it, right? And I think there is a danger in our society today of this kind of death of imagination. You know, it's like the problems are so big and it looks so hard and so impossible. So we have to remember that, like, we can actually come together and do a bit what Barry said. We can choose, like, this is what we want to do. And then we can apply our lives and our wish, all our energy towards creating it in the way that we see best. And we can play and experiment. Because for me, that's the other thing. It's like, it's a space where I have found an enormous joy in creativity. And not just in creativity of arts, but like I get to create my own reality, my own society, my own governance systems, like in my own house. Like it's an unbelievable like joy to be a creator in life again. Not a consumer, not a shopper, not a worker. I can be a creator, and I can be a co-creator. Because also kind of like Boris touched on, I feel like my agency as a human increases dramatically when I can work with others. So for me, it's like my reach is bigger when I have a community to act through and within. And even bigger if I expand my sense of community to include also the ecology and to see what is really possible there. So for me, like this quality of a richer web of relationships also make a lot of new things possible.
Thank you very much, Anna. So, can I ask you a few questions, like follow-ups, so we can have you start debating amongst each other? First of all, I was really struck by the fact that, apart from a few instances, the word ecological footprint, flows of material, numbers, calculations of sustainability indices, even sustainability itself and almost ecology itself wasn't at all central in what you said. It's not a criticism. It's extremely interesting. It means that, probably, I don't know what you think, but when we think about sustainability, it's a totally interdisciplinary field. And B, it seems to me like the human and social and cultural dimension spontaneously come first. And I want to hear you about that. Do you think that sustainability in the narrow ecological sense, in the, calculating your footprint, seeing if you have like 1.2 or 1.4, how you're doing with your consumption and so on. Can we really do this as nations, as cities, as communities, if we're not, let me say, profoundly happy? And I'll ask you a second question, but let's first have you maybe say something about that. You can just manage your own discussions amongst yourselves. Who wants to answer first? I don't know. Anna seems to want to go. Okay, go ahead.
Because I was actually going to quote some scientific research about ecological footprints at you, but I didn't have time. So.
Well, but in the short time you had to choose the human dimension first.
Yeah, but I do want to say that it's true. I feel like we often do speak a lot about the relational, like if it's a relation with like the non-human nature or with human nature, but somehow for me it has to do with this. Like if I want to achieve something, I'm achieving it with people and with nature, so I need to pay attention to relationships. If you want to know about ecological footprints, the last study of an eco-village in Europe, I'll just put it in there, sure. Is of Clough Jordan in Ireland, which have an ecological footprint of 1.1. So that's pretty
cool.
Good.
And are they happy?
I don't know if they're profoundly happy. Last time I heard they had some pretty big conflicts going on. So.
Well, okay, anyway, sorry. Tao.
Yeah, sometimes we play with this notion, at LaMas, we play with this notion of healing our relationship with the natural world, outer and inner. And yeah, it's great to hear all these kind of different responses and yeah, freedom and community. It is really important. It's an intrinsic part of it. And the two feed each other. You can't sustain a low ecological footprint on a land-based lifestyle unless you are feeling nourished and rewarded within. You just can't sustain it. Community can help, will help empower you. Community in terms of human community, and community in terms of your relationship with the environment and all the plants and the animals that support you in that way.
Oh, sorry, logistical issue. The volume. Maybe you can talk a little bit more into the mic so we hear you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would be interested to get the footprint of all the wars which are happening, really, because it's just destroying human relationships on the long run, and it even has a long-term effect on human relationships. So to calculate that into ecological footprint with all the wars dimensions on the real ecological side, this would be interesting for me. So for me, it really goes beside at each other's hand, because, we are part of nature. And if we are not happy and we are not effective for ourselves, we pollute our environment. So, and this is what we do then with nature. So I think it came this way around, that this patriarchic system also produced this way of nature pollution, because somehow we as a society are not anymore really happy with each other. So yeah, it has its exchange from each other's side. So for me, all the changes within ecology happen through people who carry it through and who go for it and do it. So I think nothing will change if people who are doing the change are not happy within changing. So yeah, this is somehow my try.
Okay, thank you. Boris, since I'll let you reply in a second, but if you want. But since you talked about the kind of golden rule, the good size of a group, I wonder, could we say, probably not totally, but could we say that groups of humans, the less happy, I mean, in a deep, not superficial sense, but in a somehow deep anthropological sense, the less happy humans are with each other, inside themselves and so on, the less sustainable their lifestyles tend to be? Would you guys, and so are ecovillages kind of each one of them is a kind of an attempt, like a laboratory, to kind of reboot, to try to have and reorganize things, or however you do it, so as to try to be happier. And so, in the sense, the ecological positive results come as a consequence, or are you actually you're also looking for a connection with nature as a condition for happiness, right?
I think that happiness is a very tricky thing to define.
Sure.
Of course,
Okay.
and this is obvious. And I think it's also very much depending on your surrounding. Because if you see psychologically that happiness is buying the latest iPhone or whatever, you will also pursue this kind of happiness. That I won't define more. In a smaller group, I think happiness very much also came from the relationship between everybody. But don't get me wrong, community can be a hell or can be a heaven, depending on how much are you able to build the relation with others. And I say that because I was talking about the golden rule. In Damonhur, the single individual communities are between 10 to 25 peoples. Less than 10 is almost impossible to support a project beside all the activities that each one of us do, because you work, you study, you have boyfriends or girlfriend. More than 25 is getting too stressed to have a community, because it became more of a, how you say, condominio. It's just a bunch of people living together and less maybe a family as a sensation. And this is just one of the possible models. I think that is the ideal thing is to reach happiness and at the same time to lower our impact on the planet. This is the ideal thing. I fear that often that won't be the case, because often maybe it won't be necessary to be happy. It would be very good to be happy, but I think we may also arrive to the point that we will have to make actions that won't be super nice for our own safety, for our own survival. But the ideal thing, and maybe we have still a little bit of time, is to do both. Because this is also a way to not come back, not to decrease our civilization, but to constantly increase in a more sustainable and healthy way.
I think to just add, I think we can also, instead of talking about happiness, we could talk about like deep satisfaction of life.
Fulfillment.
Because I think that's actually more what Ecovillage life provides. And sometimes it's hard, but like to know that you live according to your own values, you have an impact that is more within your control, and you're actually creating part of what you believe in. Already that is immensely satisfying. Yeah? And then not to mention all those relationships and deeper connections. So I think for me that's a better measure than if I'm happy right now.
Sure, but so isn't it literally about ecology, but in the environmental sense and in the human sense? Because Ecovillage is about ecology, right? That's the name. So isn't it like aren't we discovering, quote unquote, in this very interesting exchange up to now, that human ecology and scientific ecology or environmental ecology are not at all separate? Maybe cannot be separated? And maybe ecovillages are a way of co-creating like a human ecology and a new, as a result, or at the same time, a new environmental ecology. Is that, would that be an interesting way of formulating it? Or not? I don't know.
I'm going to share an observation which kind of feeds into this. Make of it what you will. So at LaMas, we bought a bunch of empty fields on the windswept hills, and there were 9 households, and we moved into these empty fields. And when we moved there, we literally had nothing. There were no tracks, no water networks, no toilets, no electricity. It was hardcore. Welsh winters are really tough. And most of us had small children, and a lot of us hadn't done this before. Most people who came to live at LaMas had no experience of building or growing food or living a low-impact lifestyle. Now, one of the things I observed over the years is households, moving from a place of feeling challenged and kind of just going, ah. And the amount of time that it took for that to happen varied from household to household. And it kind of coincided with the ecology around us in terms of the plant-animal ecology returning to a state of abundance. Because when we bought the fields, they were just degraded sheep pasture. And after 3 to 4 years, the trees are starting to grow, the gardens are being productive, the water networks are in, and kind of, the self-support systems are in place and in functioning. And you could kind of almost see it. It's almost like, in terms of personal satisfaction or personal kind of happiness, you can see kind of families or households, you're struggling, you're down, it's hardcore, and then, it's like over the brow of a hill, as suddenly your ecology, your community perhaps, the kind of infrastructure that you've been put into place carries you. And it's like the feedback loop, you finally get that connection in the feedback loop. So I'm not sure quite how that feeds into what you're suggesting, but that's something I've observed. I've observed it also at TP Valley, this process of kind of partly letting go of the trappings of kind of mainstream culture and surrendering to the freedom, to the experience, and kind of allowing yourself to be supported in a kind of feedback loop.
Yes, okay, thank you.
For me, it's interesting to listen to Lama because we have a totally different situation at our place. We were living there in these apartments of this castle. We have an old castle from 1780 built up at the Lake of Constance with beautiful beach and forest behind and meadows around. But there are old buildings. Old buildings, and we had to live there, how we found it. And in half a year, we created 1 million Swiss francs to get another 2.5 million credit to go and have won at the auction this thing at the cheapest price ever possible in a Swiss position, lakeside and all that. So, and we had an oil heating system, so we couldn't change that. We were not rich people. But we built it up the last 15 years, this community, and we went on living there. We created a permaculture garden. We created a school, a private school for children. And we did a lot of process work and beautiful things. So now we are at this moment where we can start to go for a new heating system. And I'm so proud for us. And we're doing it, and step by step. But it only happened through this community, living there and keeping the tension and going on this process. So this is why I am saying, yeah, let's build this group, let's go for that. We can change huge things, and this new heating system will cost us 1 million Swiss francs, and we are going for it. So money is mostly, you say, ecological projects, they need so much money. Yeah, they do. Why not? And why don't we go for a lot of money to change a lot of huge buildings and castles and all that?
Can I, since we have about 10 more minutes for this part of the thing, just add one thing which has struck me in what you've all been saying. And I'd phrase it like this. Do you think, living in ecovillages, having this debate about the size of community and how it impacts the natural ecology and so on, would you say that on average in our wealthy countries, the areas on which our lives are happening, even in cities or in rural areas, are simply too big in a certain way? Is there like a lack of connection due to the large span of everything that we try to cram into our days? Do you see what I mean? The kind of gigantism of the whole infrastructure that we need to be using constantly and traversing and being mobile on and so on. Is there a way in which you feel that you have escaped that through the eco-village life?
Yeah, I would say that by having a direct relationship with the land base, and that doesn't mean everyone has to grow all their own food, but it just means reconnecting with where your water comes from and appreciating where your water comes from and appreciating the processes that clean that water, reconnecting with the processes that sort out your waste and return that waste to the earth. It's through repairing our relationship with the land base that we come to appreciate what our true impacts are.
Doesn't that require a smaller scale? Because, what you're saying, Tao, can that be done in Mumbai, or in New York, or in Lausanne, for that matter, in the city? Can we actually do that in 10-story apartment buildings? All reconnect to our natural base, our land base, or how do we do that?
I think we can do that wherever we are. If we're living in a city, if we're living in the countryside, it's a personal thing, and it's about kind of taking responsibility for our relationship with our wider environment. And yes, normally that precipitates a kind of, in taking responsibility, we make different choices. that are less, that require less land to support them, that require less resources to sustain them. But I would say, yeah.
I'm so happy I stood with him at the lake at Lausanne here, and we just were still standing there together, saying nothing. And this is how ecovillages connect. They are somehow connecting in a silent way where you get tons of information, even though you don't have to speak all out. And I think this is the way everyone can connect to more potential in yourself while connecting to this huge intelligence. We all have to connect to get through this chaotic, non-linear process we're all in as human. So it needs a kind of listening to what each of us has to do to solve the problem. So, and this is what you, for instance, in communities, every community has that. You have this moment of coincidental processes, that you speak something or you think something and immediately you get the answer. So these fields are all very dense, very vibrant, and there things happen very quick. And this is something we need to raise, like a consciousness globally, so things can happen very quick. And this is what I often experience in community fields, and perhaps you know this also. And I think if we get more and more like into this moment of listening and silence, we can connect to this higher intelligence and our own potential better to serve, because we all need to serve more and leave our shadows and gremlin stuff and egoistic trip behind. We need to serve all more, whatever this means for everyone.
I want to say something about the scale question you asked, and also bring back what I think is really a key aspect of ecovillages, which is that they're participatory. So that means that they're actually created by the people who live there in the environment where they are, responding to the social and ecological challenges of that place and of themselves. So it will look very, very different if you're in a city, or if you're in a windswept Welsh, field, or if you're, in Cameroon or some other, continent. So in many ways, I feel, I'm trying to say two things at the same time. One of the things of being participatory is that you have to know where you are. You have to know who you are, where you are, what are the systems around you, how am I actually impacting them? So that's kind of what Tao was talking about. Like, even if I live in a city, how am I interacting with the world through the systems that are there, and how can I change them? I mean, maybe it's like a lighter version of being ecological, but you can go to a farmer's market instead of the supermarket. It's already a change. Yeah? So it's like you can choose what you feed and the systems that you give your energy to by your everyday choices. And you can choose to build other systems together with the people around you. And I also thought about it, with the participatory, because we talked about this ecology or social aspect, and this notion that we have to somehow rebuild the social or regenerate our cultures. I see it as quite a European question. I work with ecovillages all over the world. And particularly, for example, my friends who live in communities in different African countries, their primary concern is food security. They have social relationships, they have community, they have big networks, but they are like in big economic transformations where they are afraid that they're going to be hungry. So they're working with school children, to grow food. They're working with permaculture to increase yields and diversity in their villages. And that's the kind of point where they come together. And from there, they also grow their social relationships. But so kind of the entrance point depends also on your need. If you live in a city with a lot of isolation, probably you're going to start on a social, like we just want to kind of be together and do things together. And then from there, the rest can come.
I really believe in two elements when we touch this topic. The first one is diversity. There is not just a single model of ecovillaging. It's really a model that can apply, as Anna said, to every single environment, to every single dimension. So you can do it in just one building in the middle of New York, like someone is doing, or you can do it in the middle of Quebec with miles and miles around you with nobody. In our place, we actually have a problem of space. We would need like 3 times more of the space that we have. And the second element that I really think is crucial for a sustainable model is at least mild specialization. If we are thinking about a larger scale, for example, talking about ecovillage, and we need someone to produce a solar panel, you need a factory or you need a specialized technician to do it. So even if at least partially I believe in the independence of each piece of the puzzle, at the same time it's extremely important that each reality specializes at least mildly into something that is useful for all the others. Because otherwise you miss the complexity needed for, I would say, advance in terms of technology speaking society.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to have to move on to the next part, but there'll be an opportunity. Thank you very much. We're going to have to move on to the next part, but there will be an opportunity to exchange with the audience at the end. Substantial time will be left for that. Okay, so please hold your questions, hold on to them, make them simmer a little bit, and you'll get to ask them in a moment. Now, I'm going to speak into this. Sorry, I'm going to have to. So, I think, this was, I think, way too short, but we're time constrained. So, I found it fascinating how you, very spontaneously in your reactions, kind of mixed the deepest personal, almost chakra level evolution, all the way up to the question of the scale of how we organize a territory in terms of specialization when we want to have several eco-settlements working together. And in between you have the link between human and natural ecology, and it's all a continuum. And I think the nice thing about the eco-village paradigm is that it kind of starts to teach us again that none of these dimensions should be left out. I think in my faculty, certainly the feeling I get is that we tend, and it's just the university working that way, we tend to focus more on the latter part of what I said, how to organize a territory, that's all fine and super important. We tend, I think, to neglect a little bit the more emotional human ecology all the way down to happiness or fulfillment or life satisfaction dimensions. Not that they're absent, but they tend to be minimized in our work. So I think, if only that, it's extremely useful that we kind of see how all these dimensions should be made to interact and how they can feed each other in a very interesting way. So thank you so much for that. Now we're going to go into yet another dimension, which is thinking about building an eco-village. And we're going to listen to 2 young architects from the EPFL who received, as Elsa was saying, 2 successive Durabilis prizes, one last year, one this year, for their remarkable work. And they're going to present to us an idea, a concept, not an already made reality, but an idea of what could happen if we collectively on this campus started thinking about doing some of what we've just heard at our scale, modestly but resolutely. If we were to think of starting to build an eco-village type of settlement on our campus with specific aims of research, community building, but also self-study, including personal self-study. What could that structure look like? And now I will ask Catherine and Loïc to come up here and present to us their, I think, remarkable vision for what a UNIL campus eco-village could maybe one day, who knows, look like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everybody. So we are going to present the Ecovillage project as we imagined it for our architecture master project. So it's not a finished project, but more a reflection on how an eco-place could look like on the campus of UNIL as wanted by LaMoViDA. So this Ecovillage will above all be a living laboratory that brings together a large panel of innovative, alternative, and sustainable solutions. It offers the possibility to learn and study alternative living that are more respectful of the environment. So it's a research place, so the EPFL and UNIL researchers will be able to study techniques and technologies as well as social aspects, for example, in the fields of social sciences, architecture, science of materials, building physics, urban planning, agrology or agronomy, biology, energy or economy. So yes, this list goes on. It depends on the wishes and needs of the researchers. The laboratory will be a hub for sustainability on the campus. So he's going to be at the same time a showcase for ecology, an interactive living place, a research center, and an innovation model. The Ecovillage will link science and society, facilitate the dialogue between the different fields, and encourage an interdisciplinary and challenging study approach.
Okay, I'm gonna talk now about the architecture and the development phases that we thought the Ecovillage could have. So when we started our project, we had to look for a site that will be good, as we think, for the Ecovillage to grow. And we finally choose the site below the Bio4, so the biology building of the University of Lausanne. And that's the image you get here. So on the site, there is 2 villas already present and some fruit tree already. And apart from that, there is a lot of grass area, and we are really close from the lake and from the sports center, and really in the middle of the 2 universities, so the EPFL and UNIL. And we also wrote development because we really thought the project should develop in several steps. So in a more organic manner, so that we can learn from our mistakes and adapt, but also get more people involved and not go too quick. So concerning the phasing, we thought starting with a food co-op and a multifunctional room. So it's all open programs, so public program. And that way people can join, and also if they're not involved in the Ecovillage, they can still be concerned and go close to it. The first step is concerning the first villa, and we plan to do just really little work and already have a big impact by having an organic and local food shop. The second step for us was to have a workshop. And for us, it is a necessity to have a workshop in an eco-village, so then we can fix and have a longer lifespan of the object. That workshop in the university could also have the particularity of collecting and storing the waste material from the dump of university. There is a lot of wood and some metal and objects that can be reused. And the workshop will then give the opportunity to every student and neighbor of the university to come and fix, create, or reuse material. In a second time, the workshop will also be used for building prefabricated elements and furniture for the growth of the ecovillage. The next step for us was doing some mock-up. So in order to learn from the experiences from the ground. So we plan to make some small houses in the model of tiny house, but not really, to test the minimal surface needed for living, but also to first try some construction methods and have a feedback with monitoring and like really precise feedback, as we could have working with University and the Polytechnical School of EPFL. That's also the time in the ecovillage from which there will be people living on site. So we hope that with some people living full-time on site, the growth can go a bit quicker, and so they will be able to work more on the garden and also to the organization of the association or the ecovillage. After that, we thought it would be good to use the second villa present on the site. So always with that problematic to reuse material and structural element. And this villa is a really good opportunity for a big issue that we have in Switzerland, that are the suburban area that are not dense enough. We have a lot of villas, but the biodiversity is really low. It's only grass, so there is not much biodiversity. The land is not producing anything, and the construction part are not hosting a lot of people. So here we took the decision to elevate the house, so keeping some of the structure and also dismantle the roof in order to maybe reuse some of the material. So this will be a big experimentation playground for suburban area in Switzerland. And also we can then play with solar collector and all kind of technology that we could maybe put or add to a house to make it more sustainable. So a lot of possibility here. And then the final stage of the Ecovillage project, as you see it for the University, will be the build of 2 condominium. So it's a 2-part building that could host 32 people. The building itself is organized into 4 duplexes. There is 3 duplex for housing and 1 that contain all the shared spaces, such as a big multi-purpose room with a kitchen to do conferences or workshop. And there is also a big cellar to keep all the food that will be produced, the laundry, shared living room, a water tank for the water storage, for the drink water, or for the shower, and also all the technical elements needed to heat the place. And then on the second duplex on the ground floor, so on the other side, we adapt the typology to be able to also host some people with reduced mobility. So the rooms are bigger, and there is also a living room on the ground floor as well as the kitchen. And it leaves us with the 2 last duplexes on the upper floors that are exactly the same, and they can each host 12 people. So we thought of that number because also it was easier to organize with 12 people than having a whole 50 people in once. And with the problematic to keep a small footprint of the building, so try to go high but not that much so we don't lose the connection to the ground. So we ended up with 4 stories and 4 duplexes. The 2 buildings will also be will also give the opportunity of having an exploration of new housing typology, as I said, and to explore tools to have a more flexible, to make the building more flexible for life in community. For example, we located the washing basin in corridors, but a bit behind, but it's like completely open place, so people can use, more people can use it at the same time, and it's also become somehow a meeting point. Then it was also obvious that the shower and the toilet should be each in one room, so people use it in a really short time, and then we need less of them. Then the big advantages to do the building with more people in a shared way is that we have the opportunity to have multi-purpose rooms. So then each collocation could have a guest room or a workshop or just a study room if they need. Then the other side is also the building also a reflection about how to integrate a low-tech approach. For example, we managed to put a dry toilet composter on every floor that can be accessed from the walkway on the outside. And also we apply bioclimatic principles such as a winter garden in the south to collect the heat. And we try to do the winter garden with reused windows, as we have that many that are throwing away every day in Lausanne, because people are re-insulated and they're changing the windows, so we get all those old windows that we can simply reuse in that part. The building will also by himself talk about ecology. The technical elements are shown on the facade. So as you see, okay, a small view of the interior, we see it. So we plan to use a lot of natural material, such as raw earth, wood, and also straw for the insulation. So you can see the winter garden, and then on the left part you have one room, and in the room we try to explore like what's the minimal space we need. So we have a really little surface, but we ended up with a high ceiling, and to not waste the volume of the building, then the corridors and the toilets are lower. Then we have like more storage room under the floor. Or for the toilets, for example, we have the dry toilet composter under the floor also. And I was telling about the facade. So we try to put a lot of technical elements outside, visible, a bit in a similar way as the Pompidou, but low-tech. So, for example, we see the pipes to bring down the compost. So when we empty the composter, we can just put it in a pipe and it go down to the garden level, and then it can be used into the garden. We also see the reserve of biogas and the biogas digester. We see the cellar with the stone of the cellar, and then we add that little game that we put counterweight for the light. And that's the little things you see on the outside of the building. It's actually counterweight that people can bring up, and then it gives 1 hour of light. But it's actually a huge amount of energy, and we don't realize that just one light is that much energy. So each counterweight is about 1 ton, and you have to get it up for 3 meters for like 1 hour of light. So just then from the outside, people walking by will also interact with the ecology and the energy needed to live.
Then the gardens are established in parallel to the construction phases described, and they have 4 main roles: food production, biodiversity reserve, infrastructure, and leisure. Most of the ground is used to produce food with biodynamic and manual techniques like Hügelkultur or food forest, for example. Then the biodiversity areas will exclude all human intervention in order to preserve the nature. And at the infrastructural level, there will be phytoremediation pools to clean the wasted water, swales for the water infiltration, and ponds to store the rainwater for irrigation and domestic use. Also, the compost of the dry toilets and the biogas digestate will be spread on the production surfaces to close this way the natural cycles. Now, as a conclusion, so this is the final state of the eco-village as we imagined it, with the villa, with the food cup, the housing villa, the tiny houses, and the workshop behind, and the 2 condominiums, and also the gardens. So something similar could really exist on the campus in a few years, and we are convinced that it would be a great step forward for the research and for ecology. And more than that, such an eco-place is a necessity in these troubled times, and it would open science to a global way of thinking, including all the aspects of life. And in that way, universities will be able to link science and real life directly, facilitating new ways of life. So now it's up to all of us to work on these projects to build a nicer future together.
Well, thanks so much, Catherine and Loïc. So let me just clarify here, okay? What you've seen here is what in literature, I guess we could call an essay. It's a fully completed cycle of vision, in a sense. It's an attempt, okay? It hasn't been validated by the university authorities. It's not at the stage where it's going to be built next year. You saw the phasing, which is quite long, and reasonably so. At the same time, I think we could say this is, and I'm very happy about that personally, this is the starting point for a collective discussion on what we could do on this campus in order to embody what's trying to be said here and embody some of the things we've heard just before. So what I'd like to do now is maybe ask our four guests to, if they would like to say, their kind of reaction to what they just heard in terms of the project, maybe linking it also to what we said before.
I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great. I mean, how fantastic to have a university with an eco-village on site. The interdisciplinary kind of possibilities are immense. I mean, how extraordinary. And I think you've done a fantastic job of thinking it through. I really like the detail. I really like the thoroughness. I really like the phasing. And yeah, my initial response is like, yeah, come on.
Tao was trained as an architect, huh? So it's important. Yeah, come on, okay.
My reaction is very similar. I do not know any other place in the world that has a project like this. So I just want to give my heartfelt encouragement for UNIL to go for this, because it will be truly innovative and truly cutting edge. And I think, like you said, just the possibilities for influencing countless students, but also visitors, other universities, other campuses, and to further a very different way of research and study is immense. So I think it's really, really great. And also really congratulations to you, because I've seen you present it before, but it's a really beautifully executed vision and project. So it's great. But go for it.
I was excited to listen to that, really. I like the starting point with the food co-op. This is a good point to start, I think. And somehow in the way on the phase 2 or 3, I don't know when it was, I lost it somehow. So I got to see the buildings and I got to see the design thinking in it. But I lost somehow how you're creating this community there. So the social aspect, how to create also the children's plays and the school question and all these questions rising up there. How to coach this project on a long run, what dimensions you want to include into the process work which is needed. So all this more, I would say, social aspects, I would like to be designed more so it really gets visible a bit more what kind of culture should develop there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true that we didn't have that many time to think about the social aspect in detail. We were really worried that the eco-village would be closed by itself, so we tried to open it more as possible with the workshop and the food co-op and so on. But in that way, we couldn't manage to do it all. And that's also why we did the stepping. So starting with the food co-op, then we have time to think, and people can join the association, and then we hope that we can build together something with the social aspect in it.
To answer from the perspective of the association, actually we are working inside the association to have an horizontal governance, and we are trying to forge that into our association. So everything we are learning at the moment will come handy at one time, at least we hope. And so here they presented an architecture project because it was for their master in architecture. The other aspects are more worked on by the association.
Yeah, before Baris says his reaction, I want to emphasize as well that we've been working also on the social and human aspects, both as Elsa just said, within the LaMoViDA association, which has been existing for how long now? 2 years? 3 years? I mean, the initiatory group is 3 years old, and it's been a while. And from the beginning, the students have been running with this project, not this one precisely, but the idea very fast. And they've organized, it's a total self-organization. I initiated it 3 years ago, but I completely lost what they were doing for a while. And they merged with all sorts of workshops and ideas of governance and how to create community and so on. And this year in the class Sustainability and Lifestyles, we have several groups, which are, many of whom are here tonight, who are working in part with Anna on different aspects, and Baris, this morning we had a session on the human, social and cultural aspects as well. It's true that they didn't appear so much here, but so it was a good question for us to add that. Sorry, Baris.
I think it's an incredibly interesting project. Sorry, I'm very touched by this kind of Yes, perfect. Because I really think that could give something unbelievably precious to the university, both for the individuals that could live there. That would be a very interesting experience for the students living there, because it's a completely different way to experience the university. Also, living the thing people are studying. And at the same time would be, I think, an amazing think tank for the university. So on many different levels, I think would give to the University of Lausanne a very high prestige, also leadership in projects of this kind, and endless possibilities in cooperation with other reality at all the different levels.
Okay. Thanks. Let me see what we're supposed to be doing now. Are we finally going to let this poor audience speak? I think we could now open the discussion to the floor. I do want to insist on the fact that the goal tonight is not to focus simply on this project here. Okay? The goal is to show you kind of the whole gamut of what we have going here at the university in terms of concrete, but also theoretical and scientific thinking about ecovillages, what they can bring, what are their limitations, why are they interesting, should we look further into them, and so on. And so what I would suggest is that we start having questions first on the first part. I'm sure some of you had questions that you wanted to pose on the first discussion about human ecology, natural ecology, and so on. So I suggest we start with that, if you agree. We're going to have a microphone going through the room. Who would like to start? Over there, yes. So Vasco, you should have taken off your sweater. I think you're going to be running around. We would like to have relatively short questions, no monologues, please, if that's possible. I'm speaking from experience, I'm very sorry. But go ahead, please. You press the green button. Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for organizing such a thing, and thank you all for coming from so far. My question was more like, how can those eco-villages actually build, from a really materialistic point of view, a new future? Because you've spoken a lot about like personal development, personal enlightenment, or like development, that kind of stuff, but that's kind of personal. And how can that really help creating new spaces, creating eco-villages, but also like transition the rest of the population into it? Because from a personal point of view, going into one of those villages requires big capital, cultural, financial, social capital. So the vast majority of people cannot do it like that. So as we know, people destroying the world, organize themselves really well. How can we organize ourselves really well to actively
regenerate the world? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. You could just pass the mic around amongst yourselves and have relatively short replies as well. Thank you.
One is the effect of the presence of a community of an eco-village, if properly built, is the beautiful effect on the surrounding. For example, in the case of Damanhur, since Damanhur is present on the valley in which it's present, I think the population of the valley basically doubled. And also from an economical point of view, many new businesses was opened. And that was a valley that was in complete decline since the Olivetti factory that was present and the mine that was present closed down. So actually the presence of the eco-village represented an opportunity for all the surrounding. And I think this is one of the key elements, because I don't think we all need to live in eco-villages until there is a healthy relationship between the different realities that are present on a territory.
For me, it's very important that eco-villages get to be seen, because the Global Eco-Village Network really, for me, for instance, makes visible that a lot happens, for instance, in Africa. I had the picture of Africa being in conflicts and wars and all that, but it's not so. There's so much happening on the ground. And if you get to see that all and you connect to each other, it's like, hey, there's a different future happening already now. And this is the thing. You, yourself, you perhaps don't have to go into an eco-village. And we all didn't have any money, sorry. It's not about money. We connected to get together money, but we ourselves, and we all didn't know how to create an eco-village. We just had the courage to do something. And this is what everyone can do. You can go not to this supermarket, or you can buy that, or you yourself, everyone can do something. It might be small, but if everyone does a small thing, it changes all.
Can I, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say that eco-villages are a grassroots response to the socio-economic environmental crisis that humanity finds itself in. And by and large, they have not been supported by governments. They are not supported by conventional economic systems. They are grassroots initiatives that are powered by people's enthusiasm on their meager life savings generally. You know, I think this concept that people who create eco-villages have lots of money isn't true.
Can I just interject about that? Because you're right about financial capital, but our question was a bit broader and was about, symbolic capital, cultural capital. Isn't there a way in which it's true that taking the step towards creating and living in an eco-village requires some sort of something that you have in you that makes it possible for you to do that, or is this wrong?
Sorry to come again with the small flyer. I laid it down there outside. You can take a lot. You need surrounding also to do steps. if you're in a group or if you're somewhere and you can rely into a group of people who want to change the world, then you yourself can do new steps you never did. You never could imagine to do so. So if you connect to people who also want to change something, and you relax into it, because it's not about getting a strong thing you have to do. No, it might be first to recognize you have no glue. You don't know anything. And relaxing into this, okay, I don't know what my contribution to this chaotic world situation is. Out of that, perhaps you get an answer, and you get the first answer which is only yours and which might be the best.
Okay.
I think we should hear some more questions.
Sure.
Maybe we can hear a few and then we can answer like a few at the same time.
I'm not sure that will work because they might be very different, but thank you for limiting the answer time, and let's have the next question. Thank you. Yes. Press the green button.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you for this interesting talk. Coming back to this issue about ecovillages, of course, if I may say so, like the oldest ecovillages in the world are the indigenous people. And ironically, we are actively pushing them out from their natural ecosystem. We are, pushing them out from the Amazons, from the rainforests, etc. And of course, they are, as we know, them to be poor, uneducated, living in poor countries, etc., with all the connotations involved. My question is that how this whole new movement of eco-villages, being in the rich countries and in the universities, can do? What are the impacts that this can bring about?
So first of all,
Thank you.
ecovillages do not only exist in rich countries or in Europe or at universities. We have so many traditional villages and indigenous villages in other parts of the world. So in Asia, in Latin America, and in Africa, most ecovillages are traditional villages or indigenous villages. We also actively work to build alliances. At like most of our events, we invite indigenous people and indigenous leaders and elders to speak to us, to teach us, so that we can actively collaborate. Many ecovillages in the global north have direct relationships and exchanges with ecovillages in the global south for mutual support and learning and different types of exchange. So somehow, like from the perspective of our global network, the reality is not as like white and European and rich as it looks when we sit in like the widest, richest, most European country in the world. So sorry, but it's a little bit true, no? So I think it's important that the world is much broader, and you're right. And there's something incredible we can do when, like Sonja Vera said, like when we discover each other in the different regions and in the different countries and in our different realities, but we see like, wow, we share like common ethics and values, and we want something similar from the world in our very different ways. We can support each other in completely new ways. So for me, that's, I guess, the way that our movement tackles that question, also with political awareness and work.
And for instance, the work we are doing as Jen in Europe is to recognize, yeah, these are the true ecovillages from thousands of years sometimes, and really to see, hey, we can learn from them, and they know better in their situations how to create ecovillages. We don't. And for instance, there's this guy from Africa, I got to know Philip from Kenya, and he's doing such a great, beautiful work bringing permaculture, where now 40 years ago there was a huge tropical forest, but it's not existing anymore. So he brings back permaculture and doing ponds and doing all this regenerative work in this field. So he brings back what was there, and he comes to Europe to fundraise his projects, and we are connecting with him, and so we create somehow the stage for him so he can bring back money and do the work he wants to do in Kenya. So this is how Jen works.
Anyone else on this? Boris? You don't have to. You can.
No, I can bring a practical example. Damro has been twinned with Senegalese Ecovillage and more traditional village, Quai des Chantiers, and we recently come back from a mission, let's say, there to bring technologies related to food conservation, because they had a lot of problem in the production of food because they couldn't conserve much of the food they produced in several seasons. So in other seasons they had food shortages. These are extremely small example of what is possible to achieve, again, in the direct relation between the global north and global south. And I really think that the traditional people are holder of very, very important, also, let's say, social knowledge, social technologies that we all could really need.
Okay, next question.
So I have a question concerning...
Please speak into the mic because we're recording this, so thank you.
Okay, so I find these villages very inspiring, and it gives me... I would love to move in these places. Now I'm wondering about how extendable this model is to us, to our society. And particularly I was a little bit puzzled by the fact that there is the idea of occupying again a new land to create a new village, while people are already occupying a lot of land with the current model that we have. And I was wondering if there is a possibility to, if there is some place in the world where this type of experiments are done, to create a transformational environment in a structure that already exists, like more than a house in a city, but maybe a region within a city, and where there is a community that comes together and imagines something that does not exist yet, without building a new village somewhere where there is maybe nature.
Thank you. There are quite a few examples of that, right? Where ecovillages have been...
In Germany, for instance, they have, I think, 4 villages, ecovillages, which are coaching the neighbor village to get an ecovillage. This is something I know from Germany, and there are a lot of leftover villages in Spain, which are now trying to get to humanize them, so people go there and create ecovillages there in this leftover villages. And yeah, there are different examples about that.
And there are also some urban examples, since you asked about that, where the ones I know the best, it's basically people started to buy up parts of condominiums and slowly bought up like entire blocks of a city. This one I'm thinking about is in Los Angeles, where they then took down all the walls in between, in the neighborhoods, and now they are having like a very nice, I think, eco-village, very active in things that are, urban issues like bicycle culture and promoting that, and like lessening street violence and things like that. So it's also happening in those environments. I think the Transition Town Network is a really good place to look. So a very related movement to the eco-villages, but that specifically are targeting working with people who live in a village or a town, and helping them to come together to kind of create this process of eco-villaging their place. So that's Transition Towns.
Just a question to follow up on this. Isn't it easier, though, to create an eco-village in the way one wants by, for example, doing what Tao and his friends did, as opposed to being in a neighborhood like LA, where you buy a house first, then you have to wait 15 years for the zoning to change so you can buy one more, and so on and so forth.
You should ask Tao how long he had to wait for the zoning to change in
I
his
know,
place.
I know. It's a rhetorical question, but it's
I think
interesting.
it depends on what you want also. You know, maybe
But
you want to be in a city. But
maybe he wants to, yeah.
I think it's easier to create a sustainable infrastructure from scratch than it is to retrofit an unsustainable infrastructure and turn it around and make it sustainable. It's not to say that it shouldn't be done, it's just easier. And, you know, from my experience, you've got to take opportunities as and when they arise. And, you know, the reason we're gathered here today is we've got this really exciting opportunity to bring the Ecovillage experience to universities. As I understand it, would this be the first university to have an Ecovillage on campus?
To our knowledge, it would be, yes.
Yeah. You know, and you know, the diversity of ecovillages is enormous. You can use ecovillage design principles to respond to all manner of situations, both existing unsustainable infrastructures and creating new infrastructures.
But, sorry, one of you mentioned, I think it was Baris, mentioned a building in New York becoming an eco-village, like a high-rise or something. Didn't you mention something like that?
Yes, now I don't remember the name, but there are several examples in urban.
So urban,
landscapes.
like
yes.
entire buildings becoming eco-villages as buildings. Yeah. So there are examples. I guess it's more or less difficult to do it depending on the context. Sure.
Just to take the example of this project, for two things. First of all, they want to put a new level at the house. So that's one thing we can do, just to increase density and to reuse things that are already there. And another thing, it's on this project, most of the soil is not impact. Either we did some construction on a parking lot, or the construction has really low impact on the soil. And it was something really important during the thinking of this project. So yes, we can build houses, we can build new things, but we can build it in different way. We can build it with a huge impact on the ground, so we can never reuse the soil or the ground for anything else. Or we can build it with less impact, and it's what we are looking at here.
Thank you. Next question.
Good evening. So much that is inspiring and interesting and stimulating about what you've said. I'd be interested to talk about your attitudes on education, which would be interesting, but I suppose can't say everything. I'm rather struck by the absence of politics. It seems to me that you can't imagine any kind of sustainable future when 8 people own 50% of the world's wealth. It seems to me that the problem of injustice and inequality is absolutely fundamental, and there's a danger that you're just piddling around in your little islands of utopia. What, if anything, is your understanding of the interface between what you're doing and the larger political reality?
Thank you.
I really think that one of the key elements is the example. There is the concept of shared ownership. There is the concept of creating a balance between the personal income and the quality of life of the group in which you are working with. So this is a massive problem that is very hard for a single community to fight against. But is a crucial element of, I think, of the future of humankind and the future of our societies. So I think Ecovillages really set an example that it's possible to create also financial spaces, economical spaces that is more fair. Even if fairness can be interpreted in many different ways, in many different environments, but it's something that people also feel, that if you are more or less fair. And from a political perspective, I also, for example, in our condition, we are very active in the local politics. So we have one of the towns in which Damanhur is present, the mayor since 15 years is a Damanhurian. And we don't have a 50% percentage of the votes. So that means that the local population really trusted the community and the positive effect of the community. But at the same time, there is a law in the Italian parliament waiting since, I think, 20 years about legalizing communities that I think will never be discussed. We just reached the point in the parliament that they will, I think, completely ignored, because there is not a law under which legally you can put a whole community. So you need to find a way with different associations and stuff like that. So it's a constant work in progress also on that in that field.
Hi, I would say that ecovillages are about creating prototypes, viable, working, living examples of solutions. And I would refer to Christian's fractal diagrams. It's about developing a model and then doing our best to scale it up as effectively as we can. And that's not to avoid or step away from those big challenges like inequality of wealth, like the wars, those big political topics. In some ways, we all know what the problems are, but in our society, solutions are less, or seem less available, certainly less visible. And the ecovillage movement is an attempt to create replicable solutions that can be scaled up.
Just to mention that Global Ecovillage Network is step by step really realized also from the politicians, as from Damanhur Makako said in the COP21 it was, I think. Years before, they didn't approach the Gen people being there, but then it was this year, last year, there came 8 people to this Gen people standing there and offering their things. So I think the political race is somehow discovering us now and looking at us, what you're bringing. And also we as a Gen, together with Transition Town and Permaculture Association, built now this Ecovillages, which is present at Brussels at the European side to make lobbying for our goals. So there is quite a trial to influence normal politic systems.
Can I just follow up on this very important question and ask in particular, maybe Tao first, but whether the resistance you experienced against your ecovillage idea when you started it in a, I would say, lower middle class rural neighborhood, or middle class, or I don't know exactly, but anyway, wasn't it a sign that, I mean, it was quite virulent at some points. Wasn't it a sign that even though you seem to be fiddling around with, it's true, I mean, you can always say that, and it's quite, from the outside, it certainly seems that way sometimes. 9 families moving onto a field, what's that going to do to world justice? Factually true, but the resistance was so strong. It seems to me that did you have the feeling your eco-village idea was like touching a nerve that, like bringing forth something in people that they didn't want to see, or that their hostility meant that you were kind of embodying something that was perilous to the status quo?
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Well, yeah. I remember standing in a situation like this. We'd hired a local barn in the farm, and we invited all the local villagers to come, and we presented our plans for our eco-village to the local villagers, and they virtually rioted. They were absolutely furious with us. How dare we come in? What arrogance to present this on fields that they've known as fields all their lives. One woman was so furious. She had to remove herself from the room. She was, absolutely livid. I remember driving through the village, and 90% of the houses had dim lamas, which is Welsh for no lamas, just basically piss off hippies, signs all over the village. And yeah, what was that? What nerve was that? Why is what we're doing so threatening? What was that really about? To suggest that there's an alternative way of doing things, to suggest that perhaps the mainstream models aren't working. So yeah, it did hit a raw nerve, and the situation is now completely reversed. The local village really like us. They're really proud of us. They're kind of, they love us. I would say that there's no vocal objectors locally now. And as a result, we've gone on to influence Welsh national planning policy. We've now got a Welsh national planning policy that enables this type of development to happen. Yeah. So, we do affect change, and there is a cultural barrier to overcome in that.
So just to mention, for those who are interested, the Welsh government's One Planet development strategy is really quite interesting. I mean, it's very unique, to my knowledge, at least in Europe. And we've actually worked with some of our students 2 years ago to try to actually go to the canton of Vaud and show them the Welsh example and say, why don't we do something like that here? We're still stalling. But that's how the politics, I tend to agree. I mean, it's how the slow, patient politics of eco-village development works. It's by minute example and, kind of reproducing things where you can, when you can, and so on. It's certainly not a big revolutionary bang, but, probably need both in a sense.
And I'd just say, coming back to this project here, we were only able to persuade the Welsh government to introduce a new planning policy because we had the academic research to back us up, because we could bring out the academic research that demonstrated that this was a way to effect real, significant change.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please.
Hello. So as you said before, it's very nice that these eco-villages show an example of a sustainable, viable way of life. And since these examples have to be seen, and so this project that you have is a very nice opportunity, and with the LaMoViDA to promote this thing and to make it more visible. And so what advice would you give to LaMoViDA and maybe to us who want to promote this project to our new university? What advice could you give us on how to go and talk to the university, because they are not very keen on big projects that involve infrastructure?
It's still up in the air, but we're moving ahead.
Yeah. But I'm asking them. I'm asking them on their experience, from their experience. What strong arguments could we give our campus, especially on an academical standpoint, maybe, since it's more of their thing.
Speaking from my experience, we were able to bring about change through a number of key factors. We had that academic research to support us. That was really important. Media was also really important. Scaling up the profile of what it is you're proposing, getting online, highlighting it. That was really a really important factor in us creating political leverage in order to enable what we wanted to happen. So that would be my bit of advice. Get a really good social media campaign, online videos. That's how message spreads.
For us, we got the first million, I would say, by singing. So We really, yeah, we brought our enthusiasm and we stood for it. We said, hey, this is the competence I want to bring into it. And therefore, I'm standing here and I keep being present for it. And then we invited with cake and with everything. So people felt attracted and wanted to come and wanted to connect. So really this theme of, hey, you want to listen to something beautiful? Ah, yeah, come. This is something to listen to. So this point of attraction and beauty, it needs to be in a project for me.
From a slightly different angle, I would also give the advice to really find your friends, and not just like your friends like that, but the people all around, whether it's like in the local Lausanne government or local associations, other student associations, particular professors are interested, certain departments, just like really map out who is enthusiastic about this project and bring them aboard. Really create a movement around you through working with the people who are already rooting for you. Because if you create a movement of people, it's much harder to say no to something that's already magnetic, that already has like a high vibe, that already has the media presence and all of that. And it's really important to work with people and think very broadly about who all the people are who will benefit from this project. It's also people who live around the campus who could come to the food co-op, or so you have a very wide potential impact, which means that you have a very wide network of potential friends, and use that.
And the advantage for the university in terms of prestige, in terms of possibility of getting, European funds, the possibility of connecting with other realities, other university, the possibility of making Erasmus agreement with other realities, Because I really think that should be something extremely useful, and I think it's something extremely useful for the university perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh. Sorry.
We also do have like a database of published research on Ecovillages that's online. So if you really want to load up on academic arguments, you can go to the Ecovillage Network website and to the research group, and you can download a file with a reference list, basically. It's www.ecovillage.org. Very easy. You have to navigate around a bit, but it's there.
I think he's going to do it right now. Okay, thank you very much. Is there a next question? Yes, please.
Thank you. I was wondering, thinking about eco-villages, you were talking about being very active, each one of you, and I was wondering how do people who can't be very active, who have various disabilities, how could they fit into this image of the eco-village? So could you tell us about experiences or ideas? Thank you.
One guy is living in our eco-village and he's not active at all. But he contributes by being slow, because we are all so active. He pulls us back always again and again. And it's beautiful that he does it. He is a bit also in our field of doing the sweat lodge thing and being around in the ritual place. So he's somehow present, and this is a huge contribution, whatever kind of person or ability you have. I think it's about the presence of yourself with your potential being there.
I think that the journey of the eco-village journey is one of empowerment, and that kind of happens on a personal level, and that also happens on a community level. When you start to take responsibility for your infrastructure, kind of networks, when you start to take responsibility for yourselves as a community. And a community will consist of people from all walks of life at different stages of life. We were all helpless babes once upon a time, and at some point, all being well, all or most of us will make it to an old age. You'll become at least partially decrepit, I imagine. And in communities, in our eco-village, we have members who are less active, members with various disabilities. But that's okay. You know, we carry each other. We start to, as we start to take responsibility for the infrastructure networks that feed us, we take more responsibility for our health, we take more responsibility for our community.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Yes. No, please press the green, the button there. Yes.
Now it's green. Okay. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I don't know how you say this in English.
Enthusing
contributions, which really give hope at a time where you have a little hope. There is just one thing which puzzles me, because you said your community had to build this eco-village together, all together. How are you open and permeable through the ages to other people, and especially have you welcomed some migrants?
Some?
The migrants.
Migrants. Okay.
Migrants.
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so my eco-village, Findhorn, is extremely permeable. From the beginning, it was a place where people came for maybe half a year or a year, and it's still a place where many people stay for less than a year, you know, or come and live and have an experience of that, whereas other people have lived there for 50 years. So different places have different kind of setups for how you can come, different financial thresholds, different kind of levels of buy-in that you have to have, but many of them are very open to visitors, and many of them are also open to having longer term, for example, visitors or members. Most of them, I think all of them, are dependent on recruiting new members, because I think ideals, like we shouldn't expect like our children in eco-villages to continue our eco-village. We need the people with the vision and the willingness to do it, like Barry said, like to make the choice. So most communities that I know have a very active membership process for how to integrate new people. I guess that's one part.
There's a community in Denmark who is making a program for immigrants to be with them 4 months and then work on the permaculture garden and learn all that, so and get part of the community. So I love to hear about that. And there's another project in Spain which is only working with immigrants, and it's like it's their theme, and they are doing a huge 1-year program with them. And we, as in our community, tried to connect to the theme. We couldn't do it in ourselves because we were in a very chaotic phase, and you need to protect yourself sometimes in some processes and not integrate everything which comes from outside. But we connected to a project which was called Refugeen. And we went with refugees, we went to Lesbos in this crisis, 2015, I think it was, to create there a lot of volunteers places. And we did it together with 7 communities in Europe. And this was such a beautiful possibility for us to create a 7 communities vessel to help in Lesbos with volunteers. So different kinds evolved there.
Well, about the topic of refugees, we also participated in Refugeen, and we also tried, for example, to have some spaces for the Syrian refugees, and things really didn't, we wasn't able for, let's say, technical problems of Italy, legal problems of Italy. But beside that, multiculturalism has been always a very important point for us. So Damanhur have created his own culture, that is in constant evolution because it's constantly integrating the feedbacks from the new people. At the same time, what have we done is also tutoring other communities that could create their own culture, so not just to Damanhurize the whole planet, that's not the point. And at the same time, I would say that the whole community of Damanhur is maybe 1,500 people, and we have 2 communities, 2 centers in Japan, in the States, in Norway, and all over Europe. So also having people from different cultures is extremely enriching for every kind of community.
Okay, thank you. We're slowly heading towards the end. Let's say we're going to take maybe 2 or 3 more questions. I'd like to ask one of them. Sorry? Yes, we could now. I mean, we could welcome a few questions about the UNIL project. I just wanted to ask. Maybe it actually hooks up into our project here as well. Going back to the question of environmental sustainability itself, to what extent do your ecovillages, and maybe the future one here, if it ever were to exist, how would we go about measuring our impact on the land? Is that actually a priority? We've had discussions in my team, for example. Some of my doctoral students say they're very averse to the idea that people should calculate. You know, they should be looking at how much they're using, what's their footprint, and so on. On the other hand, you all claim to be sustainable, so there must be a reason for your claim. How do you get the message through without measuring stuff?
At LaMas, part of our planning permission is that we are required to measure our ecological footprint on an annual basis. And that is quite an extensive exercise. We have to gather data throughout the year. And so each year, like an annual tax return, we have to input, yeah, we spent this many pounds a year on whiskey, we've travelled this many miles in a car, we've travelled this many miles in a bus, we've used this many kilowatts of solar power, etc., etc., etc. And then it comes up with a figure. And as calculations go, it's fairly comprehensive. And when you're living the life, it soon becomes clear that it is nonetheless quite a crude indicator, because there's a lot of subtleties to life. You know, as it's not as straightforward, and it's not easy to put your lifestyle choices into a series of boxes for an economic calculation. And so we kind of treat it in that way. You know, it's a good exercise and it's worth it and it's good for research, and it is nonetheless a very crude calculation. You know, so I'll just give that feedback on that.
Okay.
I think measures can be very good political tools. You know, it's very good to shove numbers at people sometimes. So there's definitely a place for it, I think. At Findon, we do projects together with universities and researchers who come and check various aspects of the sustainability. So for a few years now, we've had a project running on energy, for an example, and energy consumption, the Origin project, yeah, so in several different communities, so we do it that way. I think the methodology can sometimes needs to be, how can I say, shifted to work on that level and scale, and to be relevant. So I think that's an interesting invitation for academics and researchers to really work with communities also, like how can we measure your impact in clearer and better ways?
That would be an excellent part of this project here, of course, yes.
And
indeed,
in Gen, we're
indeed.
also working to develop our own impact assessment that's based on our model of conceptualizing the world and sustainability, because the truth is also that many existing measures do not allow for the economic, particularly, and the cultural realities of ecovillages. It's just not, like, we are so much more progressive than the measures, I would say. Yeah? So, particularly in economy and culture, because social sustainability and ecological, like, the world is kind of catching up. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to develop that, and we're doing that in collaboration with researchers also from different countries. So we're hoping to have that online in about a year's time, as at least a prototype for how we would like to measure our own impact, like more on our own terms, but in a way that's relatable to other frameworks and to other people also.
And so, Catherine and Loïc, is there a strong measurement component in the Ecovillage project here? I mean, have we thought a lot about how to organize the research on, you know, the impact of that eco-settlement on the land?
I think the main goal of this Ecovillage project on the campus is to make some measurements. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's the main goal. It's certainly, I mean, from what we hear, it shouldn't be the main one probably, but certainly a crucial one in kind of interaction with communities that tell us this is how we think you should measure it, as opposed to us just making it up, right? Okay, Loïc, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know how I think we should measure it, but there is people doing it like in the EPFL, I know, and I also think here in the UNIL. So I think we'll just ask those people to come, and the Ecovillage will be more a link of the people that do the calculation and the people that are living it. And we hope that putting the two together, we will get new tools and maybe more accurate one.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of this project here at UNIL, it could be that the optimum is not to do the measurements oneself, you know, the dwellers, but to have teams of partner researchers coming in and helping with it, which would actually be an incredible advantage and high-powered way of doing things. Yeah. Okay, let's have a few questions maybe about the Ecovillage project. Is there anyone who wants to ask something about that? No. Yes. Oh yes, sorry. Okay, you weren't raising your hand, Heino. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. So you said you're designing a village for 32 people, and maybe it's a good size, I don't know, to start. But what if it is 32 students? You won't have the division of labor, which was stressed as an important point. So at the social level, how are you, LaMoViDA, conceiving a diversity of people living there, since everybody in this room is supposed to know that being a student is hard work, contrary to what many people think.
Yeah, no, we discussed a lot of that about that together already, but it's still a huge question for us because it's on a campus, it's in a university. There are advantages of having only students. People are not staying more than 5 years, so we have a cycling of population, and we can see like a small community going faster than any other. That could be a really good point. But if we do that, we miss the part of having older people, younger people, children, and different kind of jobs, simply. So we would like a representation. So we are trying to find a way in the middle, and we still don't have an answer yet. But we know the advantages of having only students and the advantages of having more representative population. But we still didn't choose yet.
Do any of you guys have in your Ecovillage experience, you know, inhabitants or members who are extremely busy with other things, such as being a student? Because the idea is, well, how are you going to be both a student and a full-time member of such a community that requires so much effort? I'm sure that's not just a thing with students. It's a universal problem, right?
Well, if properly organized, you can save a lot of time in a community. It's simple scale economy in a certain sense. So if just one person washes the dishes, it will save tons of hours for if instead everyone wash his own. And again, what we saw with the numbers I was talking about before, less than 10 is very hard to support projects beyond your full-time job activity, and more than 35, more than 30, etc., etc. But this is a key point that usually is overcome by working together and managing the time.
I'd also say that for me, Findhorn would never work without the people who come there to volunteer their time and energy and work in the gardens or in the kitchen or do different kinds of roles and projects. And I had some really interesting conversations with the students in Christian's class who are working more on the social, cultural, and economic aspects of this place. And the way I kind of see it being born from their visions, it's not as an isolated, like an insular place that's for the people who live there. There are some people who are residents, but it's a hub for the whole university and also for the surrounding region. So I suspect that you will have other students working in the garden, other students running the workshop, and like it will be a much broader, and maybe not just students, but actually interested members of the public. So I see a big opportunity there, at least in how you're thinking about it is at the moment.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Good point.
We have one of our community who is really studying beautiful things for us, conflict management now at the university, far away. So, and he doesn't appear anymore to the circles. So the question would be, what is the main issue where you have to appear as a community member? If it's only 2 hours a week and you don't manage that, it doesn't work on the long run, I would say. So it has to be clear where to connect to. Where's this crucial point where you are a member? If this is easy and clear, it works.
It seems to me that if you embark on this and it feels like that there is enough energy and passion and drive to manifest it, it is going to be an ongoing evolutionary process, and it's going to be constantly evolving and morphing in response to a wide range of inputs. And the community as such is going to be much larger than the 32 residents who are going to be living there. And it's going to be a wild adventure, and it's going to be full of challenges, and, life is for adventure.
And let me emphasize again, the idea is that we would, that the people involved in the eco-village and the researchers associated with it would be studying all these aspects. So in a sense, there's a sense, not to the extreme that Sonia Vera was saying, if it fails really deeply, then it fails. But there's a sense in which some failures can be research successes because you find out what hasn't been working and why. So it has to be kept within limits, but it can be a positive thing. Okay, anything else about the Eco-Village project? Yes, sir? The gentleman with the goatee.
Yeah, sorry to come back again. Very quick question. You guys both mentioned several times low-tech solutions, which struck me. Why? We live in a high-tech world. Presumably there are high-tech things that can also be sustainable.
Actually, it's for this exact reason. We are in a high-tech world, so we are researching high-tech quite a lot. So for us, because it's one of the points LaMoViDA gave to both of them to start with, for us, it's really important to study low-tech because it's not studied yet. So it's really a point of view. It doesn't discard a high-tech at all. We just want to research something that is not yet researched.
Do you want to add anything, really? Okay. Is there another question? I just wanted to finish up. I just want to hear from some of you about this high-tech, low-tech question. I think it's really important. How does for example, a low-tech, ostensibly low-tech eco-village like Lamas incorporate high-tech? For example, internet. You have internet, right?
Yeah. We've got broadband, we've got laptops, we've got washing machines, we've got all that. And there's something that cannot replace turning a compost heap. Building soil is something that, maybe there is a high-tech solution, but there isn't something that replicates the human experience of that and the human connection to that. Something so simple as touching the earth and working the earth and feeling the earth and building soil, literally creating living matter, the living matter that is at the root of everything that we are, yourselves as a human being, is a physical, low-tech, incredibly nourishing experience.
I'd also say it's a very empowering experience to rely only on technology that I understand and that I can fix and build myself. It's a very, very, very different experience of life. That's one point. The other is, I mean, this is a very big debate, yeah, about like techno fixes and like sustainability from a technology point of view. But I think we should also watch out for the blind spot of thinking that high tech, because it's convenient here and now, doesn't have a huge ecological, social, and economic impact in other parts of the world. So to really choose wisely what we integrate and how. Yeah?
Okay, well, it's getting very hot here and very late. So thank you so much, all of you, for this, I felt, quite informative and wonderful roundtable. I think we should clap, yes?
J'ai une dernière annonce à faire, certainement la plus importante de la soirée, donc je la fais en français pour que tout le monde comprenne. On continue la soirée à Zelig, donc on a une jam là-bas et un apéro qui vous attend, donc on vous laisse traverser la rue. On espère vous voir là-bas. À tout à l'heure.
C'est abusé à part ça. Pourtant j'ai mis au minimum.